hello there. Whoop, we're not there. There we are.
There we are.
Well, hello there.
Hello. Welcome to our super streamlined, perfectly executed show.
It is going to be flawless after this moment. Hello, friends and lovers. Thank you for joining us. This is 5 Minutes with Robert Nasir and Amy Nasir.
Hello.
We're glad you are here. This is the first day of YouTube scheduled show. I hope you appreciated being able to bring up that link ahead of time and leave it sitting there and ignore it. Like what the hell? I don't care. No.
It's amazing.
It kind of worked. It's changing things here at Studio Nasir. I promised this, decades ago, months ago, that we would start scheduling the shows in such a way that we could put the link out there. You can click on the link, and then when 6 o'clock or whatever your local time is rolls around, show would start. Finally, today we made that happen. It changes a little bit about the way things work here in the studio. You may see me looking a little further off camera than I usually do to see your awesome, excellent, outstanding comments in the chat, because it doesn't come up on my main screen anymore. Main screen turn on. No, that didn't do it. So there is that. That's why we're happy. You can't tell on your end. Everything just looks the usual awesome way that it does, but we are excited here in Studio Nasir today on Sunday, May 1st, the 121st day of this, your best year yet. You have 244 days remaining in 2022 to make this year one of a kind. It really is a one-of-a-kind year. We have 51 days until summer. I mentioned that last week, and now it's a little bit further along. Spring is already a month over. So I hope you're making the most out of spring, doing that spring planting and setting up for future blooms, not just of your garden, but yourself as well. We're going to talk about that today.
Hey.
And on this date, May 1st, Henry Ford adopted the 40-hour work week. Now, we love Henry Ford here.
We do.
Amy works for the Henry Ford Museum in Greenfield Village. The Henry Ford.
Yes, the one that he set up. The school that he set up that turned into a museum and attraction.
That's right. One of the greatest historical museum in the country.
Yes, it is.
But on this date, in 1926, Henry Ford Motor Company becomes one of the first companies in America to adopt a 5-day, 40-hour week for workers in the automotive factories. The policy would be extended to the office workers as well the following August, which is kind of cool. He didn't, it wasn't a manager who's like, oh yeah, we'll get away with working less and make everybody else work harder. No, it went to the line first because Henry Ford, like Hank Rearden in Atlas Shrugged, wanted the best, was willing to pay to get the best.
Yes.
Henry Ford's Detroit-based automobile company had broken ground in its labor policies before in early 1914, so this is 12 years prior. Against a backdrop of widespread unemployment and increasing labor unrest, Ford announced that they would pay their male factory workers a minimum wage of $5 per 8-hour day. $5 a day. This is up from the previous rate of $2.34. That's more than doubling. For the 9-hour day, the policy was adopted for female workers 2 years later. I don't know what's up with that. But 2 years later, in 1916, the news shocked many in the industry. At the time, $5 a day was nearly double what the average auto worker was making. But it turned out to be a stroke of brilliance, immediately boosting productivity among the assembly line and building a sense of company loyalty and pride among Ford's workers.
And this is also, it's ironic that this is today, the $5 a week, 8-hour a day work week. It's really wonderful because that it's today. Because it kind of cancels out what the socialists in 1889 tried to do in setting up International Workers' Day.
Oh my gosh, are we going to talk about that? Exactly right.
They even call it May Day, which is ridiculous because May Day is Beltane, of course. It is the celebration of spring. It is the celebration of Ostera and the pagans and all of this and the fires of Bel. Exactly right.
So, and especially because, I'll get into that in a moment, but yes, especially because of our association with the ARC UK group and our recent trip to London and meeting a lot of you out there who are friends and fans of the show. Because outside of the United States, this May Day equals International Workers' Day is not a thing. We'll get to that in a minute, but first I've got to read that Atlas Shrugged quote that I mentioned. For 10 years, Hank Rearden had heard himself denounced throughout the country because his was a company union and because he had never engaged in a violent conflict with the union management. And this was true. No conflict had ever been necessary. Rearden paid a higher wage scale than any union scale in the country, for which he demanded and got the best labor force to be found anywhere. Tell me that wasn't inspired by Henry Ford and his, well before the government tried to enforce any kind of minimum wage like that or 40-hour work week.
And, Henry Ford was an interesting character because, there's a lot to say about, how he kind of equated with anti-Semitism, which is another story. It's a much longer story. He wasn't against Jewish people as such, but he also, he hired, African Americans. He hired people of all different nationalities. He even supplied them with English courses so that they could learn English, and he made sure everybody on his on the assembly line, all the foremen, all the people managing, knew how to say one word in all the different languages for all the people there in the factory. And do you know what that word is, Robert?
I do not.
The word is hurry.
Hurry.
So he made sure all of his foremen knew that word in all the different languages. But anyway,
well, he paid twice
stuff.
what anybody else was paying, and he demanded the best.
Yes.
Which would be cool anywhere, but especially on the assembly line. How awesome is that? Outstanding. Also on this date, 1941, May 1st, Citizen Kane was released. And all I have to say about that is
and they
Rosebud.
They slid down the hill with the I don't know.
No spoilers here now.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so go watch Citizen Kane if you haven't already. The reason I bring that up is because I've talked before about how I tend to have a very Pollyanna view of film. I don't watch classic films that are real. Like, I haven't seen The Godfather. I may have seen it when it came out, but I don't remember it. And all sorts of other classic films that are a little downer, So I'm trying to catch up on watching my classic films. Try to go through the Leonard Maltin's top 100 films of all time, or the Film Institute's 100 films of all time, whatever they are. There's a lot of gaps. So I wonder, for any of you in the chat, do you have any films like that where there's a film you should see? I only saw Citizen Kane for the first time a couple of years ago. A film you should see and you intend to see, but you just haven't been able to get yourself to do it. I'm curious if anybody else falls into that same category that I do of, man, there's all these movies I know I should watch. If for no other reason than they come up as, conversation pieces or memes or however else they come out. So just curious about that one. Happy birthday to Citizen Kane. Also, happy birthday to Mary Jane Cannary. Mary Jane Cannary, born on this date in 1852. That, of course, is Calamity Jane, who traveled with Wild Bill Hickok, and it was fun because we were watching Murdoch Mysteries, and they would bring in some of these Wild West characters who really were sharpshooters in the Wild West. Some of them were gunslingers, some of them worked for the law, but then when they retired, they went on to do these Wild West shows, and so I think that's really cool, and they had great fun with that in the television series Murdoch Mysteries. So happy birthday, Calamity Jane. Finally, happy May Day. Now, here, I'm going to read a little bit from Wikipedia. May Day is a European festival of ancient origins, marking the beginning of summer, usually celebrated on the 1st of May, around halfway between the spring equinox and the summer solstice. Festivals may be held the night before, known as May Eve. Traditions often include gathering wildflowers and green branches, weaving floral garlands, crowning a May Queen, or sometimes a male companion, and setting up a May pole. And they go on. I've linked to the Wikipedia article in the show notes you can read afterward. May Day is a wonderful, wonderful thing. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful celebration. Everybody should be out there.
It's a very sexy day.
Now,
I'll just say that.
Yes, in 1889, it was chosen as the date for International Workers' Day by the Second International.
Womp, womp, womp.
To commemorate the Haymarket Affair, link is in the article, in Chicago and the struggle for the 8-hour workday, which incidentally Henry Ford did before anybody made him. And any rational historian or anybody who understands economics will tell you none of these things are possible until the market makes them possible, until capitalism makes them possible. When you force their hand by doing it through government legislation, you essentially ruin the market, and you make some people who haven't yet worked their way up to having earned that higher wage or that different work week, you make them unemployable. The answers are out there. Listen to Yaron Brook on economics and finance, and he will explain it to you in much better detail than I can. But to heck with that. Now, in America, there was the usual reactionary response. And I can't blame anybody for this. I almost like the idea, because what happened in America? Today, May 1st, is also Loyalty Day. What is Loyalty Day? Well, Loyalty Day is observed on May 1st in the United States. I'm telling you this thing about, oh, we hate May Day because it's a commie holiday. That's a United States thing. The rest of the world, I'm sure, either doesn't care or they laugh at us for that. But Loyalty Day, observed on May 1st in the United States. A date set aside for, quote, the reaffirmation of loyalty to the United States and the recognition of the heritage of American freedom. Well, I like American freedom, and I like the United States, and I'm all for that. But yes, it was intentionally to counter International Workers' Day and was conceived at the height of the Red Scare. I don't know. Sometimes I think today is the height of the Red Scare. But historically, yes, it was back in the 1920s. And Loyalty Day is still a thing, and there are still multiple states and places where they celebrate it. If you look at the article I've linked to, you'll see them. But I like that for one reason. I mean, for two reasons. I'm a patriot. I love this country. I love the United States. I love you guys in the UK too, but the United States is a unique nation. There's a reason why it leads in every way. It leads in medical advancements. It leads in GDP. It leads... I won't even go there. Enough of that. We all know. You all know the truth. But I love the concept of loyalty. And it came up, in fact, Apollo Zeus, who was on the chat hours before the show began. I'm sure he was glued to the screen there, just staring, waiting for 5 minutes to start. Although, I'm saying that facetiously because now, today, the first day when you can bring up the link, leave it on your screen, walk away, and it will start at 6 o'clock. So, point there is loyalty. I love the concept. And we mentioned in a brief exchange on the chat, yeah, there are lesser virtues. You know, he was talking about the Objectivist Virtues. You know, we're fans of Ayn Rand. And Ayn Rand has a whole philosophy and a whole list of primary virtues. There's 7 virtues, the most important virtues that you need to take as principles of behavior in your life. Don't just be honest because people make you, but it serves your own purposes to be honest. It serves your own ends to have integrity, to engage in productiveness, to have justice, treat people the way that they deserve, to use rationality, and to use pride as your method of operation, not just as self-esteem that you earn, but the way that you act. And finally, independence, the theme of the Fountainhead, which everybody should have read. But it came up in the chat, there are lesser virtues. And lesser is probably not even the right name, but there are other virtues that aren't as primary, aren't as fundamental, and one of those is loyalty. So I don't bristle at Loyalty Day, both because I'm a patriot and also I like the concept of loyalty. So if we're going to use this day to say, let's be loyal to the things we believe in, including the greatness of this nation, at least in its founding principles, I'm good with that. Loyalty in general use is devotion and faithfulness to a nation, cause, philosophy, country, group, or person. Well, I don't think Loyalty Day can be any more perfect because it addresses pretty much every one of those. A nation, because it started in America as a response to this collectivist assault. The cause of loyalty, well, there's your patriotism. Philosophy can certainly justify why loyalty to your values, essentially integrity, is important. Country, well, if you live in a great country, it doesn't have to be the United States. There are other free nations in the world, and you have every reason and right to be patriotic to them. Group, well, the group would be your kindred spirits, those who hold the same values that you do. that love your country for the same reasons you do, not blindly like nationalism,
Right.
but with good reason like patriotism. And then person, it ends on person, loyalty to a person. And that to me is everything. First and foremost, be loyal to individuals, to the people who matter to you. Not who share your values, but people who are your values. So I love it. I love that it is Loyalty Day.
Yeah, that's really nice. I mean, it's sort of like a values day, sort of a, be, make sure that your thoughts and actions and ideas are, they match up with what's real. Scott on YouTube, he says, loyalty to reality. So,
Loyalty to reality.
Yep.
Yes.
Or loyalty to your values.
Although that's a little bit broad.
It's a bit broad.
I'm loyal to everything. Well,
I mean, it's the idea of loyalty to objectivity is what that is.
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly right. And then finally, happy National Lemonade Day.
National Lemonade Day.
I don't have any lemons. I don't have any lemonade.
I saw some kids with a lemonade stand in Farmington as I was coming back from my flamenco class, or my flamenco performance.
Yes.
that I did
Outstanding.
today. Yeah, I did a performance, everybody, today. Yay! I had an audience, and I performed in front of them, and it was so lovely. And we only went on for like 4.5 minutes, but and we only did one dance. I don't know why, but that's just how it all shook out. But
it was a format. Everybody had one routine, and you probably could have done 2 or 3 dances and called it your routine.
We could have done a half an hour.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was one of those strange situations where the other the other really, really talented dancers were using their dancing abilities for, trying to get out of boxes and getting upset about it. That's, I mean, in other words, contemporary dance, where they move their arms around, they look like they're mimes, and then sometimes they look like they're doing yoga, and then sometimes they look like they're a statue, and then sometimes they do backward somersaults, and things like that. Anyway, but yeah, it was, for what it was really good, except it was extremely depressing. So then we went on as our flamenco troupe, and we actually did a song that is called Bulerius. It was a kind of dance, actually, not the song. And it's not actually the most happy flamenco dance. As a matter of fact, flamenco is not particularly happy. It's very intense. It's very, you're loyal to your values, and you're very serious about them, AKA Loyalty Day. And, and we danced our dance, and honestly, after we got done, people it was kind of sad for the other dancers, but I think we got the most applause, and people were hooting and hollering, and it was just, rah, I don't know, it just felt like a roar after we got done. It was great.
Well, there was a lot of modern dance, and it was done in a jazz/ballet/modern style, but they were clearly bemoaning modern life and mortality.
Yes.
Without words, but you could tell, and there were even props involved. And I think that the passion of flamenco, even when it implies struggle, and it's, not happy, but it's extremely passionate. And I think that, compared to what we were getting from the modern dance troupes in their routines, your dance was well done, but also it was a great relief from the rest of it.
Yeah, because, I mean, whereas, the people who are trying to get out of the box, they were all looking, kind of dismal, where we got up there and we had a lot of self-assertion. And, it was wonderful. So... Yeah, so we have a question, actually. Do we have time for a question right now or later?
Yes, please.
So
I'm looking at the studio system, because there was a bit of locking up there, and I'm trying to figure out what's...
Yeah, I'm looking at YouTube right now, and I don't see... Let us know if you see any kind of...
It was just for a moment there.
Yeah. Any kind of choppiness in the video, let us know, but otherwise I think we're all right.
Yeah, I bumped up the bit rate for you techie people, and that may have caused it to stutter a bit.
Yeah, I think that I think we have more pixels stuffed into our screen here.
That's exactly right.
Awesome.
We're super high res, which means you can appreciate more how attractive Amy is. And,
well, with my glasses off, my contacts in, my performance
I need to watch
face
more
on.
for stray hair, and all my hair is stray hair. But you get That's the problem with high resolution. There are 4K movies you watch, and you're like, I don't want to see that guy's pores, so that's the downside of being in the modern world.
Well, before we get into a question, Enric says, hey, Enric, he says, loyalty should be distinguished between being blind to reason.
Exactly right. And we did, we mentioned, for example, the difference between patriotism and nationalism. And that's exactly right. You don't want to be loyal to a fault, loyal blindly. Loyal, well, as you said, apart from reality. I think it's Scott who said. But yes, it's an important distinction to make. Loyalty has a context, just like every other virtue.
It's sort of like honesty in the sense of you need to recognize what your values are, and then you need to act, and then it goes into integrity. You need to act on that and have integrity for that. But all of these virtues, they always go back to the virtue of rationality. In other words, using reason, being rational, being focused, knowing what you want, or finding out, or actively finding out. So we do have a question here pertaining to that. Stephen asks that he's finding it a little difficult to kind of, and this is he talks about, there's a particular chapter in the Objectivism, the Philosophy of Ayn Rand by Leonard Peikoff about being rational and practicing your virtues, and there's a particular chapter in there talking about that you need to practice virtues in every instance of your life. Otherwise, and Stephen's interpretation is that Leonard Peikoff is saying that if you don't do that, if you're not 100% rational every waking moment of your life, if you're not 100% focused all the time, and you're not on completely like every second of your life, then you're not rational. Then you're morally zero. That you're not virtuous at all. It's either kind of like a binary thing, all or nothing. When I know Leonard Peikoff has talked about, and Ayn Rand has talked about, there's levels and degrees of focus. There's levels and degrees of knowing what you want.
Well, Hery Binswanger would disagree with that.
Yes, with his definition of focus, he would disagree with that.
Yes.
I'm talking about being actively engaged in something.
Right.
You can be focused, and you can be aware, and you can be ready for action at any moment, but you could not be acting at that particular moment.
Yes.
I don't think. I think, Stephen, if you look more into, like Robert said, what Hery Binswanger has said in the past about focus, and how that relates to rationality, you'll find that no, you don't need to be 100% on all time, all waking of your life. Otherwise, you're a moral zero. In other words, there's a better explanation of this before, and that somebody else has actually talked about before. But what I mean by that is that if you are, sitting waiting for a bus or whatever, and you are, looking at your phone or daydreaming or whatever it is, you still have a purpose. You are waiting for the bus. You are waiting for that software to upload on your computer. You are, whatever it is. You have to have a particular purpose in life. You have to, you should have some kind of productive activity in your life. But no, I wouldn't say that you're a moral zero if you are daydreaming while waiting for a bus, or you are, or you're watching Netflix and binging Netflix, or, there's so many contextual things about this that, that better people than I would be able to explain a little bit better, but...
Well, I'm not better than Amy, but let me explain.
Oh, okay. Let's see if you could try.
No, this is easy.
All right.
So, for example, Stephen in the chat says, from Chapter 8 of OPAR, this is Objectivism, the Philosophy of Ayn Rand by Leonard Peikoff, the best guy to explain what she meant in any area where it needs to be put into a system. Versus all the writing that she did. A little reading would tell you that unless you practice all the virtues at every instance, you are morally zero and you have no right to live. Now, That, to some folks, is going to sound like an exaggeration. Why would you put it that way? But believe me, I know people who have taken it in exactly that way and have done their best to live in a way they thought was consistent with that statement, have found it almost impossible to do, but at the same time have accepted that as the standard, and so they constantly feel guilt, and even more than that, because the people I have in mind are really great people, look at the whole rest of the world and think everybody else is slovenly and immoral and is falling short so much more than he or she is, that as much as they feel like they should be doing more, their overwhelming feeling is everybody else just sucks. They're terrible. Now, there are a lot of people out there who suck and they're just terrible. I don't want to minimize the fact that a lot of people don't live up to their capacities. But what does it mean to say, unless you practice all the virtues at every instance, and otherwise you're morally zero and have no right to live? The problem with that formulation is there are instances in which the practice of honesty is simply to keep doing what you're doing right now. And there's nothing you have to do in regard to the virtue of honesty. It's like saying that, the virtue of driving an automobile, well, right now I'm not driving an automobile. Oh, yeah, but you should always drive an automobile in a safe manner. Yes, I should always drive an automobile in a safe manner, but I'm not driving right now. The issue, and it's not that there are times when honesty doesn't matter. It simply doesn't come up. Being honest is your default. And yes, sometimes you're tempted to be dishonest, and you have to focus on it, and you have to be virtuous. Similarly, integrity. Most of the time, you act in accordance with what you believe without even trying. And the reason it's a virtue, the reason it matters is because, well, sometimes your integrity is tested. And yes, in those moments, oh, yeah, I really need to act with integrity. If I fail in my integrity, well, we'll talk about what happens then. You do still have a right to live. No, you're not morally zero, but we'll talk about that. And the same applies to the other 5 primary virtues and even the quote-unquote lesser ones like loyalty.
Yeah, so what you're saying is that virtues can be automatized.
Right. Yes. They're not automatic, but they are automatized.
Right.
What happens is they become part of your character.
Yeah, they become a habit.
And character, as Hery Binswanger will be quick to agree, and I'm sure Leonard Peikoff would too, but Hery talks about it specifically, character is a thing. Character is your default behavior. Character is something that you build, and it becomes easier and easier to do the right thing, or if you have a bad character, it becomes harder and harder to do the right thing, to break with your character, to break with, your default and automatized way of operating. And Leonard Peikoff knows this, and he talks about this. When he says that to do the wrong thing is to do the wrong thing, and the principle of doing the wrong thing is anti-life because it works against your values, and life is the standard of your values. He's not saying that because you told a lie, you are now worthless. Every other virtue you've ever practiced means nothing, and you deserve to die. Do you think that's what Leonard Peikoff means? Do you think that's what anybody believes? So if you're reading it in that way, I would suggest a reread, or maybe spend a little time cross-referencing that with other discussions of character and the fact that you don't lose credit for your virtues every time you stumble, every time you fall. That would make life impossible if you did.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the idea is that you need to be connected to reality. You need to, and you need to trust in your own ability to be objective into understanding the world. And all of that flows out of using reason. And now while you're using reason, all of the virtues are iterations, different kinds of perspectives and iterations of rationality, of using reason. So...
rationality is the fundamental virtue, and every other virtue can be tied back to that.
So it's not so much about making a checklist and saying to yourself, at this given moment in my life, am I being both honest and rational and productive and, acting with integrity and being proud of myself.
Right.
It's not about that. And it's so what Leonard Peikoff is talking about in OPAR is much more easy to make a habit of than you would think.
Yes. Now, a great way to look at this would be to use some examples, because Stephen's saying, well, can you be more psychological? Can you look at it more psychologically? Should a person keep a figurative boot heel on his head every time he daydreams, say, at work? Leonard Peikoff, when writing OPAR, has talked about how he doesn't have an 8-hour workday, or he didn't at the time. He said he's good for about 3 to 4 hours of really serious, hard work on the book, and that's it. 3 to 4 hours a day. Well, why? Because after 4 hours, he decided to evade, he decided to ignore, he decided to go out of focus, he just didn't want to work anymore? No, it's because psychology is a thing. Because your mind, your energy, your focus is finite. There's only so much energy you can put into that kind of work. No matter how much you love it, at some point it becomes either impossible or it becomes a chore, it becomes a sacrifice, it becomes pain. And you don't want that. Why would you do that? The whole point of values is they nourish your life. They are what you want. This is not a self-sacrifice where you throw your life away in the name of some moral ideal that has nothing to do with a human being living on Earth.
And,
no.
Yeah, and in philosophy and talking about virtues as tools to live your life, virtues and philosophy are not a bat in which to beat yourself over the head with. It's just, it's the philosophy is something that will help you live your life and be true to your nature as a cognitive, volitional human being.
And it's a great question, too, because it relates to a topic we brought up. You know, I haven't gotten to what we're listening to this week, but we discussed on Thursday on our own show, we talked sex, pro or con. What's that got to do with philosophy? Well, toward the end of the show, I mentioned we're talking about sex while Rome is burning. You know, while the country is falling apart, or while the world is falling apart. World War III is around the corner. Or if it was last year, we would have been saying the Second Civil War is right around the corner. I know some people who still believe that. All of this stuff is going on where we need to be saving the world, and instead we're talking about sex. Incidentally, I think the pros won over the cons. I think more people were for sex than against it, but you can listen to that show from Thursday. Link is in the show notes. Point is, shouldn't we all be spending every moment of our spare time, and maybe we should quit our jobs or find ones that take less hours so that we have more time to be fighting the fight, carrying protest signs out in the streets, calling our Congress critters on the phone, doing whatever it is we can do to save this country and save this world while Rome is burning and we're playing a fiddle. And the short answer, no, the long answer, the real answer to that is, you can't live that way. You can't do that. And you will not be an effective fighter if you try to do that, because you are acting against human nature. You're not here to fight. The reason you fight is because you're fighting for what you are here for, and that is to live a life. Yes. So you have no duty to work hard and to be productive and to be independent and to be honest, and to have integrity, and to act with justice, and exhibit pride. You have no duty to do any of those things. The whole point, the whole reason to do any of those things is because they're in your self-interest. Right. Because they will get you what you want out of life.
And even more than that, you have no duty to justify yourself to anybody, including Dr. Leonard Peikoff, or the illustrious Amy Nasir, or the mighty Robert Nasir.
I don't know. I feel a certain duty to justify myself to Leonard Peikoff.
We're not we don't have
what I mean is,
PhDs.
I wouldn't be so quick to make that statement, because I think that you do want to have that kind of willingness to look at yourself and say, I'm doing well, I'm doing good.
Right.
The question isn't, should you judge yourself? The question is, by what standard are you judging yourself? And this is not a contest between you and an abstract moral ideal. This is a contest between you and who you want to be.
Right.
And you don't figure out who you want to be by saying, well, I want to be honest, I want to have integrity, I want to be... You don't go through a list like that.
And
yes, you want to do those things and be those things and be proud of those things, but why? for your own sake, for your own ends. And if you do that, it's not that hard to say, oh, well, I am honest. I am just. I do give people what they deserve. I don't have these as floating abstractions that have nothing to do with reality. But when I encounter the need to practice these virtues in real life, I do practice these virtues. That's why ambition has to be a contextual virtue. Because otherwise you can say, well, if I'm an objectivist, I should be more ambitious in every moment than the moment before, and I should never stop trying to be ambitious, and I should always be working, and I should never enjoy a television program or take a break to eat anything more than the barest necessities. This is insane. This is not human life. This is not what this philosophy is about. It's not what life is about. And you should never put that kind of pressure on yourself to do something that is abstract, isolated, disconnected, has nothing to do with reality, and is, in fact, impossible. But the reason why I'm addressing it is not to give Stephen in the chat here a hard time, but because I know people who have tried to use philosophy in exactly that way. And I think eventually, some of these folks became more grounded and realized, oh yeah, virtues are the means to the end. The end is my life. The standard of value is my own happiness, my own success. The fact that I want to live a life that at the end I can say, yeah, that was worth living. Anyway, great question.
Great question, and I just want to mention a couple things that Enric, hey there Enric, yay, skate hard man, or whatever you say. But anyway, he says, first he mentions introspection, which is really, really good. It's something that you should do all the time, and you should really think about your life as you're living it. You should really think about what, obviously what you want out of life and what your future holds and all that. Introspect.
Go prospecting in your own mind.
Yes, and the thing to watch out for is compartmentalization. So if you're really concerned about, golly gee, am I practicing these virtues correctly? Make sure that you are in every aspect of your life. Make sure that you're not, say you have, like a job that's not very interesting to you, and therefore you're just going to be like, yeah, this job's not interesting to me. I think I'm going to steal from the company. I don't know. I'm just, not that I would, but, or you would in the audience. But, it's the idea that you've got all these aspects of your life, make sure that you're integrated. Make sure that you're processing reality consistently across the board.
When you're called on to be just with somebody, you've got to have a rational understanding of what that means. It doesn't mean that you have to figure out every pro and con about that person and exact justice upon them and force the situation such that he only gets what he deserves, or that he gets everything that he deserves. When that's not your responsibility, it's not your role within the company. No, all you need to do is treat him the way he deserves to be treated. Give him what he deserves from your own perspective.
Yeah.
Same thing with honesty. It's not your responsibility to go out there and right every wrong, every dishonesty that's ever been committed. Just be honest with people and be honest with yourself. It's not your responsibility to make sure that everybody out there is productive. If you're a manager, you can help make sure people are pulling their weight. And in terms of your own productivity, you need to be productive. How productive? Just productive. You need to pull your own weight. You need to produce more than you consume. Well, no, shouldn't I be the maximum level of productive? And therefore, if I'm daydreaming, isn't that a moral sin? No, why would it be? If Leonard Peikoff can only do 3 to 4 hard hours of work a day and then needs to rest, the fact that you find yourself daydreaming at work, again, if you're not doing it in an outrageous way that's taking away from your productivity, making things worse for yourself and everybody else at the job, if it's just occasionally you find that you daydream and then you come back to it and you get the work done and you work hard and you work as hard as you should work, which isn't an abstract standard of, well, how hard could I possibly work if I was nose to the grindstone 8 hours a day? You know what hard work looks like. You've seen people who work hard, and you can do that. What is reasonable for a human being in that situation here on Earth? What's
reasonable for a human being in that situation. And that's why Leonard Peikoff didn't spend, I have to devote 16 hours a day to writing. No.
It can't be done.
As Enric has said in the YouTube chat, he says, "You are a biological system, not a machine."
Outstanding.
Yes.
Yeah, and you have a psychology. You have requirements, you have abilities, you have scope of control. There is only so much you can do. If you have a sense you could do more, and that's making you feel guilty or making you feel pressure, that's one thing. And we can talk a little bit about that, because part of my homework for the week is to read this book, Designing Your Life. In fact, I've got a link to a TED Talk by one of the authors, Bill Burnett, in the show. We're going to talk about that. Point is, if you think you could do more, and you should do more, not as a duty, not because as a good objectivist you should look a certain way or be a certain way, but just you want more. You want more out of life. You're like, I'm good, but I'm not as good as I want to be. That's cool. That's great. That's rational. And you can do something about it. But if you're putting together a standard of, well, here's what a good person looks like, it's just not going to happen. It can't be done that way. You know, models and exemplars and heroes are great, and we need that. But look at what heroes actually do. Look at what your models really do. Look at the way, George Washington or Louis Pasteur or Andrew Bernstein or whoever your hero is, look at the way he actually lives his life. Whether he really does get in 2 to 3 to 7 to 8 hours of work in a day, what he actually achieves. These are human beings on Earth with the nature of a human being, including all of the limitations that we have.
And there's one other important question here in the chat. Apollo Zeus says, why no super chat payment option, Nasirs?
That's a great question.
It's a great question.
And the answer is, Apollo Zeus, it's your fault.
Well, I know actually he did subscribe now. He is now a subscriber. So if you're not a subscriber out there, please subscribe.
No, I'm only serious. The real answer is, because we ain't got 1,000 subscribers yet.
Right.
The answer is YouTube does not give us the super chat option until you hit 1K. And we ain't there yet. I don't know, where are we at here? 257 subscribers.
Yes.
If every one of those 257 subscribers could get 3 of their friends, and some of you have more friends than that, bring it on, could get just a few people to sign up, go listen to these two. They're kind of interesting.
Dear Mom, I hope you're having a lovely Mother's Day.
Yeah.
Would you please subscribe to Amy and Robert's channel?
That's right.
Sincerely,
That's
love
right.
always.
Send all of your friends, all of your family, your deepest enemies to youtube.com/Robert Nasir. Now,
that's what you do.
I'm kidding a little bit, but yes, the answer is you need 1,000 subscribers before YouTube enables the super chat option. And I am so looking forward to that, but it's going to take some time to get from 257 to 1K. Help us out. Hook us up. Like and share. Well, I guess share is the big thing. If folks will share the show out. We're going to be working on that. We've got big publicity in mind. It's part of having to do with the blue book I just held up. We're going to talk about that. That's going to make that happen. Goal setting and all that. The theme for the week, man, the theme for the week grew out of a couple of interactions I had. One of them was on the Book of Face, the Face Twit here, where I put up a post. It said, learn to identify good intent. Now, this to me was obvious because, especially on the internet, it's pretty easy to tell who's just causing trouble, who doesn't actually want to know the truth, versus who actually out there has good intent, goodwill, good intentions. They're out there to actually achieve something good or learn something or have a good interaction. They're not just stirring up trouble. They're not just putting out dank memes. They're not just engaged in sarcasm. So I wrote that. I said, learn to identify good intent. Learn to identify honest errors. That one goes out to you folks who think, well, if I catch myself lying, doesn't that mean I'm worthless and should die? We've all made some version of that mistake. I'm not intentionally mocking anyone.
Yeah.
But, yes. So I wrote, you have far fewer adversaries and enemies than you imagine. Incidentally, if that sounds hard to believe, listen to our episodes on benevolence, of which we've had more than one. Yep. Or listen to the previous episode on kindred spirits. You have far fewer adversaries and enemies than you imagine. Most people, including most of the people who disagree with you, are on the same journey you are. Save your weapons and your vitriol for real enemies. There aren't many, but they are out there. And you'll be a much better fighter if you're not wasting your ammunition and your moral integrity engaging in friendly fire. Sounds like standard Robert Nasir wisdom, right? One of the responses I got read, wait, what good is good intent? Liberals who want government to hold a gun to the head of the most successful to benefit the least successful have good intent. I don't care what someone's intentions are. I care how they act.
Gar.
Now,
Yar.
now, at first my reaction to that was, man, that was kind of absurd. The average, well, in this case, liberal that you meet holds philosophical premises that cause him to vote for government involvement in things that this particular commenter doesn't want. But if you met that average person, if you worked with that average liberal, if you went to a restaurant and your waitress was that average liberal, A, you wouldn't know it. B, even if you knew it and they knew who you were, it wouldn't change the interaction in any way. And C, they're just not that bad. They're not what you think they are. As I said in the original post, you do have enemies out there. There are a few. There aren't many, but they are out there. And you will be a much better fighter if you're not wasting your ammunition and your moral integrity engaging in friendly fire. Now here, friendly fire doesn't necessarily mean people fighting on your own side, but fighting people who aren't really your enemy. If this is a war of ideas, the people you're fighting are the people who hold these ideas at a fundamental level and propagate them.
Yeah.
You're fighting philosophy. And those few people who are, the particular college professors, certain politicians, certain people in the leadership of organizations, their rank and file are not your enemy. Not in the sense that our commenter here is talking about. I get it. It is a war of ideas, and we need to win those wars, those battles, and the overall war, but that's not how it's done. And I think that people who have that immediate bristling reaction have got a chip on their shoulder. It'd probably be rude to say that they're damaged. But I had written before, mean people, it's the old hippie bumper sticker, mean people suck.
That's right.
And the last time I saw that, my response was, especially in grade school. Think back to grade school. For some of us, that was a couple decades ago. For some of you, maybe not. And we all went through bad stuff.
Yep.
And you had the choice when those things happened to you, whether it was your parents being bad parents or your peers, your schoolmates being cruel to you. Certain people had bad teachers, other authority figures. There's some real tragic stories out there. And people have the choice to perpetuate that or not. And this is when good people choose to break the cycle. They don't just say, well, I got beat a little when I was a kid, but I got through it. And my kids can certainly handle it. No, this is when good people choose to break the cycle. And when lousy people go from being the victim to being the perpetrator. And I am sick to death of adults excusing this. Saying, well, kids don't know any better. I mean, yeah, when we're in grade school, we're still figuring things out. But any elementary school kid knows, if he's not a total psychopath, he knows when he's being fair and when he's being unfair, when he's being kind and when he's being cruel. And I would like to apologize to everybody out there who went through any of that, and I think we all did. It was not your fault, and you deserved better. And the people I respect the most are the people who chose to break the cycle, the people who said, well, the buck stops here, the people who said, I'm not going to be like my mother was, I'm not going to be like my father was, I'm not going to be like those kids in the playground were, I'm not going to be like whoever it is that was unjust to you. Now, there's an instance for Stephen in the chat there. Well, what does it mean to be just all the time? And what it means with every one of these virtues is when you encounter the need to be just, you do it.
Different applications for different contexts.
Yes. And again, it doesn't come up all the time. But the focus, again, is on being good, on the virtue. So somebody who says to me, well, I don't want to be kind to people because some people suck, with the attitude that, most people suck.
Yeah, if I'm kind to a person, that is that's not sacrificial whatsoever, and I'm just being benevolent and kind to somebody, what if they're Hitler, it turns out to be? Oh, what if they're a mass murderer? What if and I'm being kind to them? Isn't that unjust? Well, first of all, you don't know. And it's actually extraordinarily wrong to make the assumption out there, just assume negative intent of everybody, that people they suck, they're mean, they're cruel, until they prove otherwise. Well, yeah, no, if that's not the way that it works. And you're not being realistic. You're not in touch with reality if that's what you're thinking. Yeah, because there's so many good people out there. Even the statue dancers out there today, good, decent people. I'm sure a lot of them were, leftists or whatever their political beliefs are. But they showed up, they danced, they really worked hard on something, and I was quite proud of them, especially because this was an adult dance group. And I'm talking about not just 40s, but 50s and 60s. And they were really working and doing an amazing job at what they were doing with dancing. And I was proud of them.
We talked before, because we're talking about kindness. Why does kindness matter? And why do we assume that people deserve kindness? Why do we focus on kindness? Shouldn't we be focused on condemning people when they deserve to be condemned? And I'm going to go back to Leonard Peikoff. Because Leonard Peikoff said, in Objectivism and the Moral Foundations of Government, it is, if anything, more important to praise and reward the good than to condemn the evil. You think about this, end quote. Think about this on a personal level. Think about, the question that came up in the chat. Well, shouldn't I condemn myself every time I stumble, anytime I do the wrong thing? I don't force myself to sit up straight and fly right. Let me go back to Leonard Peikoff here. It is, if anything, more important to praise and reward the good than to condemn the evil. To speak up and fight for the men who are right and who represent rational values. Granted, evil must be fought and condemned, but then brushed aside. What counts in life? And this is the issue, of course, with the potency of virtue. What counts in life is the good. They are the men who create the values life requires. They are the men mankind relies on. They are the men whose virtues and achievements must be acknowledged above all if justice is a virtue and if life is the standard. So it is important to tell Plato, for instance, that he's wrong. But it is more important that Aristotle hears somebody who recognizes that he is right. It's important that James Taggart not get away with the fraud that he runs Taggart Transcontinental. But it is more important that Reardon finds someone who can understand what he is achieving. The first duty of justice is to acknowledge and defend the good. And in this respect, I might point out that the whole of Atlas Shrugged is a passionate act of justice, unquote. Now, to go back to the idea of kindness and even being kind to yourself, but shouldn't I judge myself harshly for my failures? Listen to the way Leonard Peikoff talks about Aristotle, and not just here, but in the ominous parallels all over his writing. Aristotle believed in slavery. Aristotle had questionable ideas about romance and sexuality. Aristotle had a lot of things that you could judge him for, things which, if you engaged in these things, you might judge yourself harshly for. And yet, Aristotle was an enormous hero. All of our lives are made better because he existed, because of the advancements he made in philosophy, including the philosophy of science. You don't judge yourself out of context. using abstract ideals as if they were Platonic ideals. So, apropos of using Aristotle as an example, Aristotle formed his moral ideas by looking at what the great men did. He was an empiricist in that way, and it's one of the reasons why he wasn't Ayn Rand. He did more than anybody could have expected at his time in history. But he was all about looking at, well, what do great men do? And then trying to understand why those things were great. But his focus on this is what great people do. He did not start with a Platonic abstraction of, well, this is greatness and this is morality, and then judge everybody as, well, how far did they fall short of that? And that's not what Ayn Rand does either. Listen to her course, Leonard Peikoff's course on Objectivism through Induction. This stuff is grounded in reality. It's not about, well, let's set up a Platonic ideal and then figure out how far short do we fall from that. The reason that kindness matters is people are decent. People are good. If they weren't, the world would be falling apart. And if you think the world is falling apart, go to Chicago. Oh, well, if I go in the right neighborhoods in Chicago, it does look like it's falling apart. No, go downtown and look at the skyscrapers that are being built. Look at the businesses that are being opened. And do the same thing in any healthy new city. There's even some of that in Detroit, although we have a harder time finding it here in Motown. We're still recovering from Coleman Young.
Thank you, Coleman Young.
But seriously, go into any department store. Go into any business, go to any service, go to any dance studio. Go anywhere.
Yeah.
And look at what the average person who's doing their job is doing. It's funny that it's hard to get into restaurants because they're having such a hard time finding help. Everybody wants to be in restaurants these days. Nobody wants to cook at home. Everybody trusts the restaurant to make them a meal that's not going to poison them. And it turns out nobody gets poisoned. How often do you read news stories about people getting food poisoning? I mean, it can happen through carelessness. People aren't out there trying to poison each other. People aren't out there trying to harm one another. People aren't out there trying to do a lousy job. Yeah, some people do a lousy job, but not usually when it comes to stuff that would poison you. It's amazing how many decent people are out there. Now, they're not objectivists. They're not morally perfect, or at least not all of them are. Somewhere between evil and the ideal is the average person. Mm-hmm. And where that average person exists is not zero. It's well above zero. It's why benevolence is rational. And it's why kindness is rational. You don't have to, you don't need to, you should feel no burden to be kind to people, other than the fact that every opportunity to practice kindness is an opportunity. We talked last week about, somebody had asked the question, well, if I encounter somebody who needs help in an emergency, I come across the drowning child, the classic drowning child in the fountain. Or the example was given of a woman. She's holding her triplets and she's got a shopping cart with just one item in it, and you're ahead of her in the line at the grocery store. Is it a self-sacrifice to let her go ahead of you? And my point was, if you don't let her go ahead of you, you don't have to. It's not a duty. It's not a moral duty. But if you don't take advantage of that opportunity to practice that little bit of kindness, you have just wasted an opportunity. Life has put this value in your lap, this chance to do something fun and nice for a person with zero sacrifice on your part. Same thing with driving in a way that doesn't endanger other people. Using your turn signal to indicate lane changes. We talked about that. How many people say, well, I don't indicate my lane changes because then somebody will just try to cut in front of you. How often does that really happen? I'm sure it happens, but how often does that really happen? If you live somewhere where that happens all the time, you might consider moving somewhere else because it's turning you into a nasty person. These opportunities for kindness are values falling in your lap. The reason why we frown at the man who doesn't give up his seat on the subway to the pregnant woman isn't because that's your duty and that's what you have to do. It's because he's wasting this opportunity to engage in a kindness at virtually no sacrifice to himself. And these opportunities that fall in our lap, the opportunity to give somebody a compliment, the opportunity to make someone's day, the opportunity to cheer them up, these are values. These are values that life is handing you on a silver platter. You don't have a duty to take advantage of every one of them. You might be in a hurry to get home to your sick wife or your sick bunny rabbit.
That's right.
And maybe you're not going to let that woman with the triplets and the white eye in her grocery cart go ahead of you. None of this is, you should never do these things out of guilt. You should never do them out of duty. They're optional.
But if you process it as a value, and Apollo Zeus in the YouTube chat makes a nice point, is that when you're kind to someone, you make them feel visible. And I would say even farther, that visibility is reciprocated.
Yes.
And it kind of, bounces off like a little tennis match of love. And and it's just a wonderful feeling when you can do a kindness to somebody that's not sacrificial to you, and it makes their day and their face lights up, and then that reflects onto your face, and it's just wonderful. Yeah.
There's a hippy-dippy expression that I like, because I'm pretty hippy-dippy. And it's so easy to brush this stuff aside and say, that's not rational, but I will show you this is rational. Be the change you want to see in the world. And, a lot of us encounter that, and we're like, well, the change I want is laissez-faire capitalism. Just being a laissez-faire capitalist isn't making that change happen. You're right. That ain't making the change happen. And you got to do a lot more if you want to fight for capitalism. And you're only going to have so much impact, which is probably pretty small in the larger scheme of things. So the answer there is you engage in fair trade in exchange of value. You be a capitalist. And so at least you get to experience what a free market looks like in your own life. Oh, but that's not what I want. No, but that's what you get. And it applies even more to these kinds of situations we're talking about. Well, I want a world where people treat each other decent and they smile every now and then. But if I just go around with a smile on my face, I don't get everybody else to smile, and therefore it's not worth it. Well, that's just so wrong, because first of all, when you go around with a smile on your face, if you're in a room with 5 people, all of a sudden 1/5 of those people are smiling.
Yeah.
You've now changed the world. But more than that, you go out there with a smile, some people will look at you like you're crazy. But a lot of people will look at you and they will smile.
And they'll be like, oh yeah, there's no reason for me not to smile right now. Thank you.
If you want to see people eat healthier, start eating healthier. You might not change the whole world. Although when you talk to people about it, maybe more people will say, I should do that too. But you yourself in your kitchen, in your house, and your dinner table, when you go out to restaurants, you will see healthier eating, even if most of what you're seeing is what you are doing by being the change you want to see in the world. It's too easy to dismiss that and say, well, but I'm not changing the world. You're changing your world. You've now got one person who's always around who's doing what you want to see. Oh, well, that's not what I wanted. Try it. See what you get. See what that does for you. Because the point I want to make, God, are we running long? Point I want to make, as Quent Cordair says, and this goes again to everybody in the chat who finds themselves a little too harsh on themselves. As Quent Cordair says, I should have this on a Post-it note. I don't have it handy, but I have it memorized. One does not deserve to be one's own harshest critic without also being one's most devoted fan.
Good. That's awesome.
Now, you tease the philosophy out of that. You figure out how that applies to a philosophy like objectivism.
Yes.
And you'll have an answer to Stephen's earlier question in the chat. You'll have an answer to all of the ways in which people find it difficult to apply philosophy to psychology. One does not deserve to be one's own harshest critic without also being one's most devoted fan. You should be the number one president, captain, and champion of your own fan club. And if you're not, if you're like, well, I don't think I'm good enough yet, or I just don't like myself that much, double check the standard by which you're judging yourself and figure out what it would take for you to be not some abstract ideal, well, I would be good if I was working harder or earning more money. There are things you can do to make those things happen, but the real question is, in people you like, the kind of people you want to know, maybe people you already know, what do you like? What do you want? What do you like to see? Not an abstract ideal. You need ideals, you know what you're working toward, but those are destinations. What do you want to see out in the world? What do you want to see in yourself? Again, the kinds of folks I'm talking about are much harder on themselves than they are on anybody else.
Yes, and again, that's Quint Cordair of Quint Cordair Fine Art at cordair.com, FYI. And I just want to say that I need to write this down after the show, but something I need to practice because it really puts a smile on my face and it really gives me evidence that that I really do live my values. Like, you know, when I was in my flamenco performance beforehand, we were out there and I was doing like little video clips of the statue dancers, and I was going to go ahead and take those clips and show them to my flamenco dancers and we were waiting to perform. Okay, so we were all on pins and needles and like, oh, we're so nervous, but as it always goes. But I offered them my phone. I said, here, go ahead. I'm going to go powder my nose. Here's my phone. Go ahead. Go through my pictures. Go through my video. And I just trusted them because I know them and I trust them. And it was just so nice that I could do that for them. And they knew what was going on because they were kind of cloistered and not watching anything. And so I just, right there, I kind of created my own world. I created a universe of benevolence and values and people getting a little view of what was happening that they didn't know about, and everybody was very appreciative, and it was just a lovely exchange of values there that I created because I was being kind and that I was offering the values that I had to give to the people who I liked. And it was so wonderful. So, looking back, ask yourself, what did I do today where I was kind? How did I offer kindness today to people? And how did it go? How did it go? Ask yourself that. And you might actually be a little surprised at like, wow, I wasn't being sacrificial whatsoever, but look at all these values I generated, and it didn't take much for me at all. So anyway, I just thought that, and it was so nice.
Most excellent. Now, we're running over 5 minutes. We're running late. I just have to say real quick, the same analysis that we applied to some of these hippy-dippy slogans, the same analysis we used when we talked about unconditional love, which in nobody's vernacular is actually unconditional. And so I love unconditional love because what unconditional really means is that all the conditions have already been met, and a single act cannot undercut that in the similar manner that somebody said, well, if I daydream at work, doesn't that undercut all of the other good things I've ever done? Obviously not. I shouldn't say obviously not, but not. Similarly, random acts of kindness, yeah, that's irrational, right? Practice random acts of kindness and senseless acts of beauty.
And I know people they're like, oh, no.
People out there are cringing. They're gritting their teeth, and in a way they should, because if you mean literally random acts of kindness, like pay no mind to whether somebody deserves it or not. Don't give good people anything better than you give rotten people. If that's what you mean by random acts of kindness, that's a vice. It's a terrible thing.
Right.
Except it's never actually random. If you've ever done this, if you've ever gone out and said, I'm doing some nice stuff for people.
Right.
You're never actually going to make it random.
It's never random.
It's never random.
And the people who say that and claim that it's random, it's not random.
And the acts of beauty aren't senseless, because if they are, they're not beautiful.
Right.
So don't. It's so easy to get the hairs on the back of our neck, to get our hackles raised at the idea of practice random acts of kindness and senseless acts of beauty. Don't let yourself be that reactionary. You do need to think about that and say, oh, well, when somebody's being irrational and says that, this is why that's a bad idea. But in reality, when the average person you meet does that, they commit some random act of kindness, it's never random if it really is kindness. And it's never undeserved, except when you meet somebody where it really is undeserved and you're like, man, you shouldn't have done that for that guy. That guy's a ne'er-do-well. You're only going to make him worse. Similarly, nice guys will finish last. Incidentally, since we just did an episode on sex, I think nice guys should finish last. I think it's the best way to finish. But when you say nice guys finish last, the question is, what do you mean by nice guys? Why do women never go for the nice guy? Trust me, women go for the nice guy. The problem is when the nice guy is a milquetoast, when he has no spine, when he's got no stones, when he hasn't got...
Right.
That's not the kind of nice guy you want to be.
Right.
You want to be the kind of nice guy who... Think of really masculine nice guys. You want to be like Dwayne Johnson. You want to be like Mark Pellegrino. You want to be the nice guy. You just want to be the nice guy who's also a great guy.
Not nice in the sense of the puppy dog that follows you around.
Which is not nice.
No, it's not nice.
That's one thing that I would agree with. I agree with Jordan Peterson on that one.
Yeah.
That weak men are not attractive. You shouldn't be a weak man.
Well, you should know what you want.
You should be a nice man.
You should know your values, and you should be self-assertive.
Damn right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to spend more time on that, but instead, I'm going to rap because it's getting late. We can't afford to wait. Oh, sorry, it's an ELO song. But I am going to recommend, on this subject, Tal Safani's Happiness Teams. I've talked about this before. Go to myhappiness.team. And the reason is that connects with this book, Bill Burnett and Dave Evans' book, Designing Your Life. And the reason I bring this up is because my homework for the week is to read this. It was recommended by Tal Safani, and I'm pretty sure that others have recommended it to me as well because it was already in my Amazon shopping cart, probably from listening to Tim Ferriss. I'll do that. I'll read it. I will report on it. I will let you know if you should read it. There is a TED Talk by Bill Burnett, 5 Steps to Designing Your Life. Essentially, it's a teaser for this book, but it's good. It's in the show notes. You should give that a listen as well. My Post-it note for the week says, today is your second chance. The recital we went to where Amy did the fantastic flamenco dancing, if you saw the clips of that from our third place win at the Ocon Talent Show, Ocon's Got Talent, you know that Amy can do flamenco dance, but her performance today was even better than that. I may get video up online of it. And after all the dancers, it was the strangest thing. It was a dance recital. So you had 5, 6 different dance troupes, and some of them did more than one routine. But at the very end, there was a guitarist.
Yeah.
He was a singer-songwriter, gets up there with an acoustic guitar and sings some songs. And he did a song called Second Chance. And the theme of his song, this is one of his own songs, so you won't find it unless you find this independent indie guy. But the premise is that he encounters a second chance and he's grateful for it. And I'm listening to this guy, and I think he would agree with this. The interesting thing is that every day is a second chance.
Yep.
A lot of us in our lives, we think, I did pretty good in life, but man, if I had a second chance, if I could do it all over again, if I could choose a different career, if I could have chosen a different home situation, if I could have bought a different house, if I could, whatever the thing is, man, if I had a second chance.
And it was so great to see the dancers who were a little bit older, because, I thought to myself, my gosh, how wonderfully brave and confident that they are, not just confident, but brave they are to give themselves that second chance, to be in their, midlife and or older, and actually go out there and get in fit, get in shape and dance like they were.
Some of those dancers up there had gray hair, and they were in better shape than I was in my 20s.
Yep.
It was great. So today is your second chance. There's nothing stopping you from regarding this moment as a second chance to reconsider and say, maybe it's too late for me to become a concert-level pianist. But maybe not. And at the minimum, I could start playing more piano. I could do this other thing. I could, I'm kind of stuck in this house. But what would it take? What would it take to make that change? If this was my second chance, spoiler alert, it is, then what would I do? So I love this because there are two sides of it. The first one is, well, right now, this moment is. But the other thing is, the problem is you wake up every morning and it's a second chance. And at some point, unless you stop and say, oh yeah, this is my chance to change it up, then you've wasted every second chance. And at some point, it is too late. So you know that last week I started waking up early and doing my morning routine, which includes my affirmations and my exercise and all the things I'm doing to get back in great shape. And I've been posting those on Twitter. For the folks following along at home, you know that my alarm failed me, or I failed my alarm on Monday and Tuesday. But Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, all days I got up before 6 a.m. I stole this idea whole cloth from Jocko Willink. Post it on Twitter, so you've got accountability partners out there. This week coming up, given that today is your second chance, and at some point you got to stop wasting those second chances, this week I'm stepping it up. I will still be getting up before 6 o'clock every day. I will still be posting that picture on Twitter for those of you who follow me at twitter.com/Robert Nasir. I'm going to be adding in harder exercise. I did this once before and I'm doing it again. I'm going Hollywood. And what I mean by going Hollywood is it's kind of fun. You follow an actor. Think of, I forget the guy's last name now. Chris. Which Chris is it that's in Guardians of the Galaxy?
Evans.
No.
Somebody
in the chat will remind me. I can't keep all the Chris's straight. Well, it's not Chris Rock. Yeah, it's not Chris Evans. That's Captain America. No, somebody in the chat will tell us. Anyway, the point is this guy was not in great shape. If you saw any of the comedy that he did before he became a big movie star, he was not in great shape. He's probably about in the same condition I'm in. And then he gets a role in... Jurassic World, the update to the Jurassic Park films, and gets in good shape.
Chris Pratt.
Chris Pratt, very good.
Thanks, Scott.
Yeah, he was in like Parks and Rec, right?
Yes.
Yeah. and he was just an average schlub.
Yeah, he was doughy.
Yeah, he wasn't in lousy shape, but he was not in shape. He gets the role in Jurassic World, and he gets in shape, and he looks pretty good. But then he gets the role in Guardians of the Galaxy. Now, you know what the actors in the Marvel films looks like. And he goes Hollywood. He gets in crazy good shape. And, it's not that he necessarily took a bunch of steroids or, went to a boot camp. He just went on a regular hardcore training regimen, and now he's got muscles. So, this week I'll be going Hollywood. Now, I don't actually have a film role coming up. But what going Hollywood means to me is if somebody from Hollywood called you up and said, hey, we want you to be in a movie, and we want it this August, and you got 4 months to get in shape. What would you do? What would you do if that happened to you, if you got that phone call, you got that opportunity? What would it look like? And I'm asking myself that and saying, yeah, I could do that. I could be like that guy who...
Well, if you were really Hollywood, you would, hire yourself a nutritionist and a coach.
That's true. If I had the kind of salary that would come with being in a blockbuster film. But instead, I'm going to do it myself. Anybody wants to follow along at home, post the times that you wake up in the morning to do your morning exercise, your morning routine, and let me know what the results look like. Excuse me, would love to follow along at home or follow along what you're doing at home. That is my homework for the week. I'm going to read Designing Your Life, and I will report back on it, and I will be stepping up my game on my morning routines. A little technical issues with this changes we've made to the format, so the podcast version of this show probably won't be posted for a few hours, but we will get it out there. Show notes will be posted right away after the show with links to all of the interesting things we talked about, including a couple little things that we didn't get to, like 9 things to remember when you're having a bad day. That'll all be in the show notes, so you can look at the things we didn't talk about and all of the things that we did talk about. Thank you for joining us. If you want to support the show, I'm going to jump right to that. Go to robertnasir.com. You can share the show using our YouTube links. Share it out to your friends. Tell them, subscribe to this guy's show. He's desperate to get to 1,000 subscribers so we can start super chatting. If you want to support the show yourself directly financially, you can do that. You can go to paypal.com/robertnasir or just use the link at robertnasir.com and make a one-time contribution. Throw some money at Amy. And me. That would be awfully cool of you. Some of you already have, and we thank you for that. If you want to support the show monthly, and this is super cool, and a bunch of you already do that, patreon.com/robertnasir, or again, the link is at robertnasir.com. Thank you so much for that. You keep the lights on here at Studio Nasir, and it is deeply, deeply appreciated. And with that said, God, we're running so late, and I still need to download the show from YouTube because the local version of it blew up. I'll talk about the technical stuff on Facebook for the people who care about that. So I'm going to wrap it up. I'm going to wrap up the show. I'm going to say thank you. Thank you for joining us. As always, we wish you success. We wish you flourishing. Amy, what have you got before I wrap up?
Happy Sexy May Day.
Yes, have a happy, sexy, my voice is done. Amy, send us out.
Happy Sexy May Day, everybody. Woo!
Yes, love to you all.